Radio 94.3 New Jersey.
Well, we're moving on now to the town, to a deluxe apartment in the sky.
Hi, this is McBoomin Moving, box truck for rents for all your light moving needs, anywhere within the Northeast Orange, Irvington Orange areas. $50 a trip from Monday through Thursday, $60 from Friday through Sunday. Call 862-279-9300. That's 862-279-9300.
Oliver Samuels here, and I just want to invite you to come out to the People Profile Awards Sunday, June 18, 2017 at the Bailey Hall, right up there in Fort Lauderdale. Guess what? Me will be the recipient of the prestigious Lifetime Awards. Don't take out one syllable of the meaning of the word prestigious. It's a black tie affair, nothing less. Yellow man, get your glass here, and that is a great achievement. Now never be the recipient. I'm taking it to another level.
Know what I am doing? Downloading the Western Union app. I need to send money to my auntie in Nigeria. Know what I am doing now? Checking today's exchange rate to Nigeria on the Western Union app. Now I'm sending my auntie money to help her with her groceries.
Download the Western Union app today. Use it to check today's exchange rate and send money to loved ones in Nigeria. Western Union, moving money for better.
Western Union makes money from currency exchange. Carefully compare fees and exchange rates, which may vary and are subject to change. NMLS number 906983.
For the most authentic Caribbean food in town, check out Sunsplash Caribbean Bakery and Restaurant. They got natural organic juice bar that'll get your day started right. Like the Power Punch, the Vegan Juice, the Mega Green, Roots like the Immortal, and the Resurrection. Peep this, they have an extended bakery department that whips up my favorite, the hot Hardo breads. White or wheat, that's your choice.
If you're feeling hungry, just grab a bite. Sunsplash liquid food is right. Jamaican patty, I tell our veggies. Sunsplash liquid food is right. Mix the deal to the caramel porridge.
Serving breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They also cater to vegans and vegetarians with the Ital stew and the Ital aki, the soul jerk salmon and mango tilapia. And of course, they got the usual curry goat, oxtail, brown stew chicken, jerk chicken, and so much more. I mean, their menu is extended and they're highly rated. Your best bet is to just stop by or give them a call. They're open Monday through Wednesday, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., Thursday through Saturday, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., and Sundays, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. They're located at 56 Main Street in Orange, New Jersey, and can be reached at 973-395-3777.
These are some hungry days. We need some more food up on we empty plate. Long time we there, how we sit on a wait. Sunsplash restaurant and run the place. Everybody we say just want a taste, yeah.
Let your food be a medicine. Eat well, live longer. I'm David Shepard, and I endorse this commercial. Answer that, don't you? I bet it's killing you, seeing that soft glow just inches away. Hey, someone wants to tell you something, or maybe ask you something. Oh, come on, answer it already. Just so we're clear, that wasn't my fault. Next time, ignore your inner thoughts. Don't text and drive. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Council and your friends here at Splash Radio.
Splash Radio 94.3 New Jersey, Rich.
Well, you don't know, so Mr. J represent for 94.3 FM Splash Radio. We just splash out the music on them.
Your attention, please. This is no ordinary show. Covering news and information for Essex County, New Jersey, and beyond. This is the Eric Dawson Radio Show, broadcasting from 94.3 Splash Radio. Now, here's your host, giving it to you like only he can. It's Eric Dawson.
Hey, this is Eric Dawson. This is the Eric Dawson Radio Show, 94.3 FM. Call in number 973-457-8000. Again, it's 973-457-8000. To listen through your mobile device, it's 213-493-0287. Again, 213-493-0287, and you can always check us out online. We're streaming live on Facebook. Haven't quite figured out the YouTube and Twitter stuff yet, but we'll soon be on those two channels as well. But right now, you can check us out on Facebook. I would ask you guys, as always, please share the video so that more people can know what's going on. And I'm joined here. Today is Tuesday, Education Conversation, and I'm here with former Chairman Rashon Hasan. How you doing, bro?
I'm doing well. Good morning. Good morning.
Man, so, well, I mean, listen. I mean, there's some serious education stuff that that we're certainly going to be talking about, but there were a couple things that I saw. So I try to pull some stuff out of nowhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know how I do. So there was. And I'm listening to the talk radio shows this morning, and over the last couple of days, there was apparently some very attractive 25-year-old teacher, somewhere in Colorado, I believe it was, who has been having an affair with underage students. And well, my understanding is if you're a high school student, it doesn't matter. Even if you're 18 years old, it's still against the law. But the conversation was just so much different when they were talking about her than if it were a man who was having sexual relations with female students. And it just said to me, like, the law is that an underage, that it's illegal to have sex with an underage person, whether man or woman. And the man or woman who is engaging in that illegal activity, doesn't matter whether you're a man or woman either, but it just seemed that there's still a swath of the society that still says that if a young guy gets to make out with his older hot teacher, somehow you give him a wink and a slap on the back and you say, "Good job, son."
Yeah, I think I think there's still this double standard that obviously exists. But I think, when you have conversations with, women who actually have sons, their view on this thing is definitely different. Like they see it from a different perspective. They're not looking and saying, "Oh, good job, my son went and had sex with his teacher." I think, for women, they're looking at this thing and they're saying, my son was also violated, or an older woman took advantage of my child. And regardless of whether it was a male as a teacher or whether it was a female, keeping in mind that this individual violated the laws and they violated their responsibilities as an educator. I personally look at this as in the same manner as an individual who may be, an executive for an organization who decides to go out and engage in sexual activities with the subordinate, or someone who's in a position of power, right, and goes out and they decide to engage in sexual activities with someone who reports to them or supports them in their functions. So while this is a child, I think there's also some concerns from a professional perspective that I think needs to really be examined, that needs to really be focused on. So a role of a teacher is to educate our children, and they also have to move in the manner in which they're exercising their best judgment and they're doing what's in the best interest of our children. And if anybody is in the education space and they can't uphold those particular values, they can't deliver on that, then they need to be removed from that position. And I would argue that, whether it's a male or a female, that this individual should not be allowed to continue to teach in the education space, period. I don't care if they get up and move to another state. I think that we have to take matters like this very seriously and remove those individuals out of that space.
And I think that I think it goes on more often than we suspect in the schools, where you have inappropriate relationships, especially at the high school level, and we just need to be diligent and keep our eye on it. The second thing that I read about, just in general in news, regarding schools, was apparently there were two kids. I can't remember what town it was in, but they have been taking pictures for the yearbook, right? So you have the whole yearbook committee. And did you hear about this? So one kid had on a Trump shirt that said, "Make America Great Again." And the other kid, who was like the president of the freshman class and part of the yearbook committee or whatever, wrote a quote pertaining to a Trump quote to be added into the yearbook. Well, lo and behold, when the yearbook was printed, one of the teachers who headed the yearbook, I guess the editorial overview board, photoshopped the shirt. So it was a black shirt that had red writing on it that said "Make America Great Again." I believe it was. Maybe it was white writing. And I just overstepping your bounds. Just in general. Like, I didn't send you these links, but I just figured we just have like a candid conversation about it. But freedom of speech, from what I understood, and I heard about it, but what I understood was that the kid and the dad read all of the regulations and rules that would explain to you specifically what you can and cannot wear, what kind of language you can or cannot have on your shirt, and they didn't violate anything except this individual's preference in terms of who she wanted to be president of the United States.
Yeah, and there's actually precedent here in the state of New Jersey and throughout the U.S. as it pertains to protecting the First Amendment rights of students. There are some cases that involve students. One in particular where students were they received disciplinary action for supporting breast cancer awareness, and these students actually came to school and they wore shirts. I think the shirt said "Save the Boobies" or something along those lines.
I remember those.
Right? And there was a big issue about that. And what has come to pass is that the Supreme Court has reaffirmed that schools themselves have to respect the First Amendment rights of students. Like, they're just like every other citizen. However, there are instances where, depending on the climate, for students' voice or students' actions can be seen to incite, harm. Then I think that the schools do have a right to step in under those circumstances to try to kind of police that situation. But here, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think whether or not you agree with President Trump and his rhetoric, his agenda, at the end of the day, if there are individuals who support that and do believe in that, then you have to respect their First Amendment rights. Again, as long as they are not violating the rights of any other person, particularly in this case, any of the students that attend the school.
All right. Well, those were my two little, did you know kind of pieces. So you sent me some links for very interesting topics. One of them is how education funding formulas target poor kids. Was one. The other ones that I read earlier today in preparation for the show was from U.S. News and World Report, where I'm trying to get the headline, because the headlines are always important for me. It says education's double-edged sword.
Yeah. So this one is very interesting. I think.
And let me post this one in.
Yeah, I think you should definitely post this one. So this one comes from the U.S. News and World Report. And again, it's titled, the title is Education's Double-Edged Sword. In the Trump era, charter school groups are navigating a thorny political environment. And what this article really highlights is the fact that the Trump administration has really, doubled down on expanding charter schools and school choice programs, and they've also pumped some money into voucher programs throughout the country. And in doing so, these are things that actually benefit the education reform and charter school sectors throughout the country. However, in order to do so, we also know that there were enormous cuts in President Trump's education budget this year. So on the one hand, you have an infusion of funds that are going to support education reform, charter school expansion, school choice, voucher programs, but then he's also cutting money that really helps that same group of kids that the education reform and charter school sectors are supposed to be helping. Right? So on one hand, it's saying, hey, we're going to give you more money so that you can expand school choice, etc., etc. But then on the backside, we're going to slash some of this other funding that that you guys also need to have in these school districts. And in some instances, some of that funding has been held constant. But by holding those funds constant really means that you're still experiencing a decrease in funding, because you have to take into account inflation and other rising costs.
But I want to ask you a question. When we talk about the things that he's talking about cutting, these things, and yes, they have been kind of flat funded, right? They haven't seen an increase as inflation has gone up. But have these programs, I mean, in terms of measuring success, when we look at the district and we look at the myriad of problems that still exist, I mean, is money for these programs the issue?
No, I think we kind of default and use money or funding as the reason why students don't succeed in certain environments. And I think there's definitely fact when we think of the disadvantage that poor children have when you compare them to wealthier students, right? We talk about access to great programming, and not just what takes place in the actual school setting, but what those students are able to participate in during their summer months, what kind of programs those students are able to participate in on the weekends, and even after school. But when we actually look at what's taking place inside of our school systems, I'll use Newark as an example. There's $1.2 billion that gets funneled through the Newark Public Schools District annually. And, I think $1.2 billion is certainly enough to run a school district, but we still have a number of students who aren't performing on grade level. We still have a number of students that end up falling through the cracks or falling through the system, and they don't get that opportunity to make it to the next level. So I do not believe that funding in and of itself is the sole purpose for school districts not performing and not helping students get the best education possible. In every school district, there are actually people who are put in place to help deliver that service of a quality education. So, I think that we also have to examine the people. We have to examine the infrastructure. We have to also look at what kind of curriculums we have in our schools, right, and how we're actually going about teaching our children these standards that are in place right now. So if we as leaders in our community are sitting back and saying, hey, our schools won't improve unless we get more money, unless you give us more funds for our schools, then I think we're fooling ourselves, and we'll be sitting around and we'll be waiting for a long time.
Well, that's what I was getting at. Is it a red herring? I mean, granted, if you have more money and you have more efficiencies, you might be able to use that money wiser. But and look, it's not for me. It's never really about me trying to beat up on Donald Trump just because, right? Or to side with him just because. It's really about looking at what's going on and trying to cut through the biases that exist on both sides, and then look and say, you know, while the Hatfields and McCoys are battling, our children are still failing. And so looking at it through that lens, if we recognize that there have been a lack of efficiencies and, quite frankly, the fact that, I mean, we just can't, we need to be fiscally responsible, right? And so, like you said, on one hand, he's saying, look, I want to create this huge budget, $20 billion at some point, right, for education reform. But I don't want to just continue to fund these other things and just have this money. We're going to have to cut some places to be able to have this $20 billion to provide, to push into the ed reform space.
Yeah. Well, you know, one thing one thing that's really kind of taking place as a result of some of these budget cuts, you now have educational leaders on both sides who are saying, hey, this is not right. You've actually had some educational leaders who've come out, and while they may support charter schools or they may support voucher programs, they've come out and they've made statements opposing the budget cuts that the Trump administration has made in the educational space. So while they understand that some of these things have been beneficial for them, they're looking at this thing, they're looking at the whole picture, right, and saying, well, it's not fair for these group of schools to get this great opportunity or to get additional funding when we're taking away opportunities from these other students who, by the way, we're all supposed to be working to support anyway. So I guess my question is, you know, when we talk about receiving additional funds, that question has never been answered. That question is being, what will we do with those additional funds? You know, if someone came into, you know, one of our urban communities today and, you know, drop $500 million for us to improve education, what will we actually use what will we use those funds for? You know, sometimes we hear, oh, we need to have more people. Okay, we hire more people, but once we hire those people, are those people going to be hired to do anything different than what we currently have in place right now in our school districts? And if the answer is no, then we're very foolish to think that we would end up with different results. Now, I do understand adding, you know, additional staff members such as teachers, right? So because you want to reduce the student to teacher ratio, you want to make sure we don't have overcrowded classrooms, etc. But again, are we just hiring people for the sake of hiring them and not really having a clear strategy in terms of how we can best utilize the skills of these people to move our school districts forward and to improve the educational outcomes for our children?
So when I'm looking at some of the cuts, it says some of the biggest axes would fall on a $2.3 billion program for teacher training, right, and class size reduction, and $1.2 billion in an after-school program, which serves nearly 2 million children. Many of them are poor, and a $190 million literacy program would also be cut. So, I mean,
now let's talk about that for a minute. So, after-school programs, we spent some time talking about that here on this radio show, and the fact that after-school programs are so important for our children. So, all right, we look at a community like Newark or East Orange, Irvington. All right, you're slashing after-school programs. What are these kids going to do now? What do we have now to replace that?
But here's the question that I want to ask. Is the government responsible for providing after-school programs? Should organizations within our community, I mean, we have the NAACP, we have the Urban League, we have IYO, we have the Y, we have churches. I mean, all of them could step up and create after-school opportunities. And so, I mean, I'm just throwing it out there to say, you know, is it something that the government should be responsible for footing the bill for?
Well, I think when you look at the larger society, the the government should be doing things, since obviously they want to be in the educational space and they want to have an impact on what happens within local environments as it pertains to education. Then I would think, yeah, they should take some ownership and some responsibility in that, because by making that investment into these children, it helps benefit the larger society, right? So you also asked the question about local organizations, local churches, etc., whether it's faith-based organizations or nonprofits. Yes, they should in fact be stepping up and doing more to help support our children. But let's just be honest about it. Some of these organizations don't know their ass from their elbow.
Well, then there's where I'm getting to. And so when these organizations are able to exist in our community and pretend that they're doing something, but they're really not, meanwhile you have the government that's footing the bigger bill to take care of the things that these organizations are supposed to be here taking care of, then we need to move those organizations out of the way. We as a community need to demand that those organizations step up or step out. But to simply say, you know what, we're going to allow those organizations to exist in our communities, we're going to allow them to perpetrate a fraud and collect grant money for doing stuff that they're really not doing, and then we're going to lean heavy on the government to do the thing that organization should have been doing in the first place. I'm simply saying, let's clean house, let's see who's doing what. And I don't know the answer to this either. Is he talking, because it said a $190 million literacy program would also be cut. Is he talking about, well, I'm sorry, let's not talk about the literacy program yet. Let's get back to the after school. He says $2.3 billion in program for teacher training and class size reduction, and a $1.2 billion for after school programs. So he's cutting $1.2 billion for after school programs. Is the after school program, and I don't know the answer to this, I don't know if you do, is the after school program currently a $1.2 billion program, so he's wiping out the entire thing? Or is he saying, I'm going to trim it by taking $1.2 billion out of it?
So, I can't say it off the top of my head what that actual number is. You should look that up. But whether it's getting rid of the entire program or just, I guess according to them, trimming some fat, some areas can't, some school districts can't afford for any more trimming. Right? Let's just look at Newark as an example. There was a point in time where we had after-school programs that were available for our students. The schools were open from 3 to 6 p.m. And then, we had like open gym or recreation from 6 to 9 in the schools. Now we don't have that stuff. So again, if you're talking about taking away those funds, and you look at school districts that don't have as many after-school programs already, then what's going to be left? So I think in some instances, some school districts may see a reduction in terms of the services that they're able to provide. And I think once this gets down to on a local level, some school districts may not be able to provide the kind of after-school programming that they need in their community without having strategic partnerships and without having outside entities such as nonprofits and faith-based organizations coming in and providing those services for free.
So here's an article that, because I was looking it up, this is the beauty of the internet, right?
Yep.
I haven't found anything, but I did see something, and we'll maybe during the break, I'm gonna forward this to you. Maybe during the break, actually I'm just gonna put it in a thread, and you can click on it. Maybe during the break you can look at it and see if we want to discuss it. But it's from the Brookings report, and the headline is, and I'm not big on just reading the headlines because sometimes headlines are deceptive, but it says the $1.2 billion after-school program that doesn't work. That's from the Brookings report. So, but that's kind of what I'm getting to, right? So, and I'm not purporting to know, guys. I'm simply saying that when we see the information, we need to do additional research to understand what it is. So, if you're already predisposed in your position about Donald Trump, and so irrespective of what he says, it's simply who he is that will lead you down a path of wanting to accept or listen to it, I think that that's a dangerous place to be. The question is some of what he's saying makes sense, and can you separate the politics from rational thinking? You still may want the guy out, but maybe 10% of what he's saying makes sense, and maybe this is 10% of what makes sense. And for me, I want the kids to be educated. I want the kids to have whatever is necessary for them to receive a quality and fair education. I think any overspending needs to be cut, right? And so if that is what's going on, then I'm in support of it. If it's not what's going on, then I'm not in support of it. But I think that we need to get to the bottom of really understanding what's in these cuts. Because I do know that on the government side, a lot of folks have all kinds of things hidden into budgets, things that don't need to be there. And they're not beneficial for our kids. But because so many voters are low information, the immediate thought is, I'm losing out on something. They can really take something from me. But it was something that was there, but that wasn't helping you in the first place.
So, well, I'm looking at this this article that you just mentioned, Eric. You can find this on brookings.edu. And again, the title is the $1.2 billion after-school program that doesn't work. So this is a program that that was appropriated. So it was created in 1994, the Improving America School Act. And it was basically an obscure provision to promote schools as community resources, right? And so there was initially no appropriation until Congress appropriated $40 million for it in 1998. By 2002, the program's appropriation went from $40 million to $1 billion.
Okay.
Right. So we see a huge implosion. This has really just exploded in terms of the amount of funds that were available for this program. And there are also a number of evaluations, a series of reports that have actually been conducted on how the program affected student outcomes. So the data that was collected was around student grades, test scores, attendance, and student behaviors. And the reports were released in 2003, 2005, and the answers emerged that the program didn't affect student outcomes, except for student behavior, which actually got worse. And small samples were not an issue, explaining why findings were insignificant.
So now let's stop for 1 second. Let's just stop for 1 second. So we're gonna do some more research, not necessarily today, but we're gonna continue to do the research. But here's the thing, and I swear to you guys, we started talking from the article that you posted, and I was looking up. I just Googled how much money is the government spending on after-school programs, and that Brookings report showed up in my Google search. I saw the headline. I sent it to you. That's real time. What happened? So here becomes the question: if that Brookings report is correct, is it possible that the $1.2 billion that he's talking about cutting is simply that program? The one that's not working. The one that hasn't done anything. So we're running around like chickens with our heads cut off, or Chicken Little saying the sky's about to fall. Is it that he's saying, look, somebody sent me this report, and I saw that this program that was established in, the early 90s, you said?
Yeah, 1994 was when it was established, and Congress appropriated $40 million.
$40 million, and then it ballooned
in 1998.
In 1998, it was funded with $40 million, and it ballooned from $40 million to over $1 billion in how much time?
4 years.
In 4 years. So somebody took a program, they put $40 million in it. And then some lawmakers looked and said, you know what, we're going to put an additional $960 million into this thing. And then there was very little examination into this until whenever the report came out. And then when the report came out, it showed that it had very little, if any, positive impact. And here we are right now parroting, maybe, I don't know, just maybe, parroting somebody else's political agenda when this guy, and I'm not a Trump supporter, I'm simply saying that we need to be more informed, we need to be more educated, and it's okay to not like the person, but acknowledge that the thing that he's doing or she's doing may be right in that instance. Now, they may be doing some effed up other things, and you should talk about them. But if this one thing, as you ferret it out, is making sense, then we need to acknowledge it. So, the article that Rashon sent, I posted in the thread, and then this Brookings report is posted in the thread too. And now you guys can be informed and empowered with the information.
So, one thing is that I think is important for us to highlight, and I'll go back to one of our earlier conversations about budgets for school districts. It is extremely important to make sure that school districts are evaluating the academic return on investment.
Right.
We talked about that. How much money are we pumping into programs, and what are the actual benefits to our children who are involved in these programs? And that really should be how we prioritize our spending in the education space. And in this article, it also highlights that there are some programs that have been working. So one after-school program that is highlighted to have shown positive academic outcomes is the Higher Achievement After School and Summer Academic Program in Washington, D.C. They recruit their students carefully, and they provide them with hundreds of hours of programming during school years and summers, and it costs them about $4,500 per student each year.
But do we know whether that is the is that going to be included in the 1.2 billion?
No. So this is a separate initiative. The one that we're talking about from the government is known as the 21st Century Learning Programs, and the funding that's spent in that program is about $600 per student per year. So again, if there's data that shows that the programming is ineffective, I would argue that there's a need to reevaluate, right? Figure out what changes need to be made so that we can have.
But we know ain't nobody gonna reevaluate. Come on, but we know ain't nobody gonna reevaluate those programs because somebody's getting paid.
But it's unacceptable to just say, "Hey, we're gonna get rid of the program" without coming up with any kind of recommendations to make any improvements, especially when
see what you're saying.
When we know that black and brown children are going to be impacted the most when these kind of programs are cut.
Right. So, but if the immediate thing is to stop the bleeding, right? So you know that the program doesn't work. You have data that says it doesn't work. And again, these are just two articles, so we haven't done exhaustive research into this. But let's take these articles, both of them, at face value. So Donald Trump wants to cut $1.2 billion from after-school programs. We see in a particular after-school program that has a price tag of $1.2 billion. I gotta say to you, I don't think that's coincidental. That may very well be the program. So he's not cutting programs; he could cut that one program.
Oh no, this is it. It's one program that's done federally. And for those of you who want to know the name of the program, it's 21st Century Community Learning Centers.
Right.
And again, the whole purpose of this was to make to have these after school programs that made schools resources in the communities. So now, if we tie this into the conversation about,
do we know if North was getting any of that money? Somebody was asking.
We can look into that.
Mm-hmm.
But as we can now tie this into the conversation about community schools, because that's the whole premise of having community schools, so that they now serve as resources for our community. So, again, if the program in and of itself is ineffective, why is it ineffective? Like, for me, it's just not enough for these individuals to pump out a report evaluating the program, saying that it's not impacting certain outcomes for students. Why? Why is that the case? And until we get to that, I think that, I'm not sure how we can really resolve this issue. I don't think that just cutting the funding is the answer for that. Because if we have, let's say as an example, the teachers or the individuals who are leading these after-school programs are the same people that are teaching our kids in the classroom. So they're ineffective in the after-school program. What the hell do you think they're doing when they have the kids during the regular school hours?
But these are the evaluations.
You understand what I'm saying?
But these are the evaluations that we're talking about having, right? So the argument about Park and the people saying, well, you know, it was okay with NJ-ASC and some of these other assessment tests where they were assessing the student but not assessing the teacher, and now that they want to assess the teacher, the unions are up in arms about it, and Johnny still can't read, but teachers are getting promotions and they're getting these positive evaluations. All of this stuff is lumped in. That's all lumped in. And so now when you talk about the $1.2 billion and you say, well, okay, based on however long it started in 94, right? Now it's 2016, so we're talking, what is that? 26 years or something like that? 20 some years? So 20 some odd years, this program has been funded at the price tag of nearly $1 billion a year, right? And it hasn't produced anything. And so, in as much as I agree with you, Rashon, that, you know, we should find a replacement, while we're trying to find a replacement, we can't continue to pour good money after bad. Right? And so...
listen, a bad investment is a bad investment, right? I don't care if you're talking about investing money into a bad stock or investing money into a bad real estate deal. Once you find out it's a bad investment, you try to correct that.
And now let's be truthful about this too, right? We say that black and brown kids are going to be impacted because a lot of them are the ones who use these programs, right? But grandma, mom, dad, uncle, aunt, they knew these programs were working for these kids. They knew. But nobody complained about it. Nobody went and said, you know what? Nobody went to community meetings, local, municipal governments. Nobody went and complained about it. They just got the money and just said, you know what? That program, they were going to send that boy there. He ain't doing nothing, but he out of this house. And this is how that stuff impacts you now, right? Because when you look and say, well, all these communities, they realized in these homes that nobody was benefiting from this, and it was costing enormous taxpayer dollars. And now that they're talking about taking it, now people say, well, we need to evaluate what wasn't working and what was working. Well, I'm saying you had almost 20 years to look and to be honest about it. So people were pocketing money. Folks were sending their kids to these programs and they weren't benefiting. We see it through the test scores or through the low graduation rates. So all of this stuff was just going on and on and on. How to fix it, I don't know. But it's a bad investment right now. Maybe somebody should come and propose. Maybe some of these people who are complaining about this, these people who are writing these op-ed pieces, why don't they go and propose some after-school program that's actually going to have an impact? A positive impact, instead of just bitching and moaning that he's cutting a $1.2 billion. They want to keep it? And again, I don't know the answer to that question, but and I agree with you, Rashon. We need to have advocates and people, smart thinking people in the community who are looking and being honest about it. Say, hey, look, you know what? The dude is right. This thing wasn't working. This is what it was producing. You know what? But we have something that we could go and negotiate with him and propose to him. And now if he rejected that, right? So if people in the education space or in whatever space that comes up with ideas for great after-school programming and things like that that help benefit these communities, if they said, here's a proposal that we're going to put on the president's desk because we recognize that that thing wasn't working. And if the president said, nah, I don't want to see it, or if the president saw it and said, no, I don't want to act on it, then I think we have something to complain about. But for these people to complain that he's going to cut a program that we all knew wasn't working, come on, guys. We could do better.
Yeah, and it's also came across a 2002 report that came from the federal government that I think we should post up on the website or on the Facebook post thread rather, just so that you know the informed class can actually take a look at this.
But here's what I want to know on a local level while you're posting that. Where's our esteemed president of the Board of Education? What's he got to say about it? I I'd love to have him on the show. Love him to weigh in on this. Does he read the Brookings Report? See, this you can you know where I'm going with this. See, we complain at the national level, but we don't handle our business at the local level to make sure we have educated people who can advocate for us. So, what does our esteemed president have to say? What do all those board members that you guys just elected have to say? Hey, what does the mayor in Orange have to say? Because he's the guy who, when you all wanted to elect the board and he said no and had it reversed, what does he have to say about it? See, to have the conversation on the national level without having the heartfelt conversation on the local level, because that's where the impact is, right? It's in our communities. So when a person said in the thread, well, we're going to have that kind of programming in Newark. Well, yeah, see, you want to know how it's going to affect your neighborhood. You want to know how it's going to affect those badass kids who don't get to go to the program and become better kids. Well, you need to be more engaged, more involved. Because $1.2 billion was on the line while you were sitting home asleep while people were voting in people who were setting policy.
So keeping ourselves on this path about funding, The Atlantic produced an article on June 1st, and it's entitled "How Education Funding Formulas Target Poor Kids." And in this article, it highlights the findings of a report that determined that 35 states have policies that are engineered towards sending extra dollars to needy school districts, but not all of them are successful. And one thing I wanted to highlight in this report, it goes through and shows which states are regressive and which states are progressive as it pertains to school funding and getting additional dollars to the neediest students, those students who are poor or low income students. So we look at New Jersey. Local funding for New Jersey is considered to be regressive, meaning that the local funding formulas do not allow a school district to send more funds to the needy students. We look at federal funding in the state of New Jersey. That seems to be somewhat regressive. You have about $500 per pupil that goes towards an additional $500 that goes towards students who are poor or low income students. And when you combine the local, state, and federal funding, that shows that low income students are getting about an additional $2,000. And then when you just look at the state funding in and of itself, because here in the state of New Jersey we have the SFRA, which is the School Funding Reform Act. We also have the former Abbott districts, which are now known as the SDA districts, that in fact receive additional funds because of their inability to make their adequacy funding. And adequacy funding is basically covering the cost of your local education needs through your local tax base. We show that again, the state funding for New Jersey is according to this report, is considered to be the most progressive funding in the country as it pertains to getting additional funds to low income and poor students in the various school districts.
So our lawmakers are working.
Which means that and this is very interesting, because if you go from town to town and you have conversations with our elected officials, everyone says our funding formula in the state of New Jersey is broken. School districts are still being underfunded. You have some schools that are being held harmless because the funding is supposed to take into account a school district's enrollment. So when these numbers were frozen, I want to say 7 years ago, if your school district had 30,000 students enrolled in it 7 years ago, but now you only have 20,000 students, because that's frozen, you're still being funded for 30,000 students in your district, even though you're only servicing 20. So I think obviously there are some concerns there because there are some school districts that are receiving more funds than they need and should be receiving, and then you have some school districts that are receiving less funds. But again, overall, according to this report, New Jersey is by far the most progressive state as it pertains to routing additional funds to low-income and poor students. And the state that falls in second place is Connecticut, followed by Alaska and Rhode Island, and then Pennsylvania.
So there's work to do. There's still work to do, but we're doing some work. Let's take this call.
Absolutely.
Hello, caller? Hello, caller? Caller? Oh, they may have hung up. All right. So there's work to do, but there's work being done. But it is a hot button issue in this upcoming gubernatorial race.
It is, and I think so.
Okay, let's see if we get the caller now. Hello, caller. Uh-oh. So are we having a phone issue again? Wait 1 second, caller. Yeah, I think that we may be having our phone issue again. Just grab that phone and see if they're on the line.
Caller, hello. Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, so the caller's on the line. So if they have a question, because I haven't figured out.
Hold on for 1 second.
Okay. Here, hang it back up.
So while we figure that out, let's we'll kind of keep talking a little bit.
Hello, caller.
Yes, good morning.
There we go. Good morning.
Sounds like Brother Farrakhan.
Yes, it is. This is me. How y'all fellas doing this morning?
Good, brother. How about yourself?
What's up?
And I just want to say I agree with both of you gentlemen on your perspectives, but for me it has always been that when you deal with the financing with education to I guess for poor and low income children, the biggest problem is you're dealing with the symptom instead of the disease. And you cannot win we know this, right? Like cancer gets how much money put on the symptoms and the problems, but never curing the disease. And right now, the disease is being poor and low income. And you're putting $1.2 billion towards the results of being poor and low income, but you're not stopping the poor and low income aspect of your life. So you can't change anything if all you're doing is working on the symptoms, because you're still your little brother. You might be in the program now at, let's just say, 10, but your little brother who's 6, he's still poor and low income. So when he gets a certain age, he's got to go through the same program. It's not going to graduate people's or change people's lifestyles. You have to change the core problem. And that $1.2 billion, if it's not working,
but you can't put that. So yes, there's a symptom, and then there's a cause, right? So you can allocate some money toward the cause, but then you have to also allocate some money toward the symptom. Right, so you can treat.
Not really, Eric. This is what we were talking about yesterday.
If I have a cold, if I have a cold, right? I'm the symptoms of my cold are, or let's say I have something deeper, right? Whatever it is, the symptoms are playing themselves out, and the doctor's treating the symptoms, right? Which may be it's causing me to have a headache. Causing me to feel woozy, right? And so I'm getting some sort of medication to alleviate the wooziness and alleviate the headache. But at the same time, they're working on finding out the root cause of the headache and the wooziness. But they're not gonna go to try to find the cause of the wooziness and the headache and ignore the fact that I'm in pain with a headache.
And I get you on that, but again, you're still gonna have a headache. Right, you'll have if I treat your headache for today.
Right, I may
your headache return tomorrow.
The headache may return. Correct, and I get that.
So if we want to stop the headache from returning, we're going to have to That's the thing. That there are no programs for that. Are there programs designed to get these poor and low-income people from being poor and low income? Not how to live poor and low income a little better.
No, I get that. But for me, part of the after-school programs, right, is so we understand in our community that we have undesirable elements out in the street, right? Gangs, drugs, prostitution, whatever, right? So, and then we also understand the culture in our community. You have single moms. Some of them are working 2 jobs, so they're not home. So you have latchkey kids who are 9 years old, 8 years old, who are responsible for doing the right thing, but they often do the wrong thing because they're encouraged by, these deplorable people out in the street. So we understand all that exists. So now you create the after school program which says, you know what, the latchkey kid, I'm not going to give you a key now. You go to that after school program and I'm going to call the person who is the director of the after school program, make sure that you got your little ass in there at 4 o'clock. Right? Now what you do is you at least get the kid off of the street and away from those elements that could influence him. Now, there should be some other things that are working on those other issues. But you can't say that the after-school program should be solving the drug issue, should be solving the prostitution issue, should be solving the gang issue. There are other things that should be doing that. That after-school program should have been doing what it was supposed to do. And I'm saying I don't know that it was.
No, and you're absolutely right. And that's my point. These other programs aren't solving the reason you have to have the program. So until this country decides, or Congress or whomever decides that we have to solve the problem that makes us need the after-school program, it's not going to work.
So are you essentially saying, because maybe
check this out, right? You get out of school at 3 o'clock, and you go to the after-school program, and you're there until 6. But then once you're done at 6, you still got to go and deal with everything.
You got to go back into that. You got to go back into that neighborhood.
Right.
Right.
So until you work on that problem, truly effectively work on that problem, again, like I said yesterday, our children will be having this conversation. Your kid or whomever, the next generation of radio talk show hosts on Splash Radio will be having this conversation. And that's the whole thing. We have got to get to a point where we talk honestly about the condition that these poor and low-income people are in, how they've gotten it, and why they're still in it, and how do we change it. When that happens, then you. All
right, but then you're talking about a cultural shift, right? And are you now asking the government to be accountable and responsible for a cultural shift?
Why not? They've been a part of the problem.
I'm going to let you answer that. I'm going to let you answer that, Eric, because that's what you say every day on the show.
Right.
Every day on the show, you hold the government responsible.
Right.
You just got finished.
But I don't. But listen,
no.
But understand what I'm saying. I don't hold the government responsible for the fact that this 17-year-old girl decided to go sleep with this gang member who's got 5 other kids throughout the ward. Right. I don't hold the government responsible for that. So when we're
responsible for being a gang member,
what?
You might not hold the girl responsible for having sex with him, but tell me you don't hold him responsible, and the government to some degree responsible for the condition that makes him a gang member.
Do I hold the government responsible for the fact that no, I don't hold the government responsible for the conditions that made him the gang member, because then you know what that would require? It would require me to look and say, for all of those who lived in that same community who didn't become gang members, is the government responsible for the fact that that person didn't become a gang member and wound up going off to an Ivy League school? Is the government equally responsible for that? No, what we say is, it was a strong kid, it was a strong family. We hold the government.
I would never say that. I would only say that nothing is 100%, right? Not everybody is going to gravitate towards streets and gangs. No. Just as not everybody is going to gravitate.
So why isn't it? Wait. But why wouldn't you say that maybe somewhere along the line, some government program that kid might have encountered in the 3rd grade for 10 minutes might have jump-started something inside of him that led him to do something different? Why wouldn't you give the government credit for that then? If you're going to blame the government for the guy who's the drug addict, or the gang member rather, right? Why not reward or applaud the government for every person who's not?
Well, we do. We do that.
Do we do that?
I mean, when you see a success case, when you listen to Denzel Washington say how what was the Boys and Girls Club was so monumental in his life and keeping him on a certain track, nobody's taking anything away from the government. I think that's the problem. A lot of people think that you can't do both. You can criticize the government for where it's.
We're getting ready to take an 11 o'clock break. If you want to hang on, you can.
The current time,
Splash Radio 94.3. Reggae, dancehall, soca, hip hop and R&B, African,
my kid going to the University of Pennsylvania,
disco,
had nothing to do with the government.
oldies but goodies.
Hi, this is Janet Jackson.
We're bridging the gap. Seriously. Splash Radio 94.3 New Jersey.
Are you looking for real Jamaican cooking? Look no further than the real, authentic, and bona fide spot in Newark, New Jersey. Star's Pressure Pot Restaurant at 347 Sanford Avenue, serving the best curry goat, oxtail, steamed fish, jerk curried fried, and brown stew chicken. Call today, 973-350-6657. There's always a special at Star's Pressure Pot Restaurant. Stew beef Tuesdays, stew beef Wednesday, cowfoot Thursdays, seafood and fish fry Fridays, Saturdays, it's Portland Jamaica style jerky. You name it. Star's Pressure Pot Restaurant is open every day, Monday to Thursday, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Friday and Saturdays till 10 p.m. And check out early Sundays, noon to midnight, with all your favorite games. There's a live broadcast every Sunday at Star's Pressure Pot Restaurant with all your favorite DJs. Catering and delivery, call today, 973-350-6657, or check them on the web at starspressurepotrestaurant.com. It's always a good day at Star's Pressure Pot Restaurant. We know that when it comes to your vehicle maintenance, you've got a lot of options. In fact, with so many options, it can be challenging sometimes to find a reliable and affordable auto mechanic. But that's where we come in, Belmont Motor Works, with a commitment to providing our customers with honest, quality service at reasonable prices. Belmont Motor Works has one of the most modern, state-of-the-art automotive service and repair facility in the entire state of New Jersey. Our technology, education, and expertise will provide you with the best car care service imaginable. For an appointment, dial 973-268-8199. Right now, get a check engine light diagnostic, an oil change or tune-up, brakes, or just a performance upgrade. Belmont Motor Works got it covered. We're your one-stop shop, the European specialist, specializing in BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Range Rover, and all luxury and high-performance vehicles. 973-268-8199. We also install engines, transmissions, starters, alternators, timing belts, water pumps, and so much more. Trust the trusted Belmont Motor Works, conveniently located at 531 Central Avenue in Newark, New Jersey, and find us on the web at www.belmontmotorworks.com.
Mr. G represent for 94.3 FM Splash Radio. We'll splash out the music on them.
Hey, so this is Eric Dawson, the Eric Dawson Radio Show. We're back, and I'm back with Rashon Hasan, former chairman of the North Board of Education, and we have Farrakhan Swab on the line. And so, Farrakhan, I want to say to you before you continue, I'm not rewarding the government for the successes or the failures of my children. I'm not going to say that my children being able to achieve the things that they achieved. What I will say is that policymakers have created an environment. They've created whatever that environment is, right? That terrain. And now it is up to us to navigate that terrain. It could be a rocky terrain, it could be a smooth terrain, it could be a mountainous terrain, it could be a flat terrain. But whatever that terrain is, that is the terrain that now me and my family have to navigate. And the decisions that we make determine our level of success or failure. And so I'm not giving the government that power over me and my family.
I respect that. But at the same time, look at the benefits in your life. I'm not talking about from the government. I'm talking about you were benefited with the father that you had, right? Who gave you certain knowledge and encouragement. And I'm supposing other members of your family, right? And I'm sure Brother Rashon is the same, and myself. I believe we're like all Muslims, or at some point in our life taught that, right? Because we were given something by people who looked at it differently, and it gives us a different benefit. I don't give the government credit for my daughter being a straight A student at North Star. I give that to myself and my mother. I remember reading to my daughter every single day until she was probably in the 2nd or 3rd grade. I made sure I knew that she knew what she was supposed to know, and so did her mother. Right? But that's me. That's because I.
Oh, so then wait a minute. But then I don't understand. Then if you're not going to give the government, credit for your daughter being a straight A student, how do you criticize the government for the kid next door being an F student and a gang member?
Okay, but at the same time, my daughter did do much better, or does much better at North Star, where she's a straight A, where as opposed to when she went to.
But wait a minute, but there are kids at North Star who are not doing well, right? There are kids at North Star who get kicked out. So I'm saying again that you can create an environment. I'm saying policymakers, the government is responsible for creating an environment. Now, whatever that environment is, it is up to the individual to navigate that environment to be successful or not to be successful. So North Star, in and of itself, it's not going to produce anything. It's just a building. It's going to create an environment whereby children, if they do certain things, and if parents are engaged in a certain way, have an opportunity, and maybe even a better opportunity. Right? Because like I said, some landscapes are flat, some are mountainous, some are rough, some are smooth. And so maybe North Star has a smoother terrain. Right? But you still have to navigate that terrain. You still have to navigate it.
Of the programs where you said earlier that it's because of the household situations that people have to put their children in these after-school programs.
Correct.
Because they're navigating a life terrain. The thing is, I have made my life somewhat easier. I have benefited from the fact that I am self-employed and can do things a certain way. And you are able to do things because you're educated and you can do things.
Well, some say I'm not educated, but I appreciate that compliment from you.
Brother Rashon is the same way, right? He's
right.
Clark. So we are, believe it or not, which you might say, an exception to this rule, because we have made ourselves to some degree out of the situation. But the problem is there are way more that have still been trapped in the situation, and they don't know how to navigate that terrain. They don't have what we have, whatever it may be in our individual lives that spark it. Okay, and because of that, they are stuck in this generational, situation in which they are raising children in poverty to stay in poverty, right? To stay low income. Even though they may not want that for their children, they still don't know how to get out of the situation. We, however, have been like, we can't be that, well, I made it, why can't everybody else make it?
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't go that way.
Yeah,
there are some people stuck.
Farrakhan, I agree with you in the term, in the sense that there are unique circumstances for everybody. Not everybody has the tenacity, the skill set, or support systems to arise out of certain situations. I'll also add that the government has to your point, right, when there are programs and initiatives that the government implements and they are successful and they help bring about change, we should commend them, just as we should be on the government's ass when they are doing some of these creating policies that have a negative impact on our community. The government has created environments, and I'll salute to my man Archange Antoine from Roselle, who's with us on the Facebook thread. And he posted some of the things. The government, it definitely affects culture, especially among African Americans, Latinos, people of color. Just think about slavery. Think about Jim Crow. We think about this war on drugs, which was really a war on African American and Latino men. We think about mass incarceration. And all of these things were not just supported by one person. They were supported by policies and the institution that made these policies that then helped shape the environment that these black and brown men
But I don't disagree
live
with
in.
But I don't disagree with any of that. And so what I say is that, so now, the terrain got a little rougher. right? And so what we do in terms of these after-school programs, we understand the impact that it had, and it's like a bomb, landing in our community, right? That was crack, that was all of that stuff. So boom, it decimated a family. So now we wake up and we look around and go, okay, well, what do we need to do to rebuild? What do we need to rebuild? And so now what we need to do,
Here's where the government. Check this out. You just made a great point. You said, look at how things happen with crack and so forth, right?
Right.
Look right now. This whole, especially the state of New Jersey, it's all up in arms because white kids are dying over
opiates.
Pills and so forth, right? Now, black kids have been doing it forever, right? I just saw an HBO show where a guy said it's about the opioid thing. Every person that was on it was white, and so they cared, right? And see, that's what happens. Guess what? The rules are going to change for opiate prescription drugs in the near future if they're not already changed.
Well, they already changed. We did a show on Health and Wellness Wednesday where we talked about right. But wait. But what government does is it sets it sets out a set of conditions by which people now have to live. Right? And some of those conditions are rough. So they're the conditions for black folks under the crack epidemic. They were rough conditions. They're smoother conditions that people have to live under during this opioid epidemic. But the government simply sets conditions. When you identify,
they only set the conditions when it affects them adversely.
Right. I'm not arguing that point.
They're not changing the right.
But I'm not arguing that point.
What we're talking about. When is the government going to change its position when it's us? See, as long as it's us that are that low income that need that program, they don't care.
Right. So what I'll say to you is this, but okay, and I want to get back onto the education piece, but what I'll say to you is this: when you sit, or when we sit, right, and we sit on our hands, and we say, as though the government is this entity that we don't have a role in, right? And we sit on our hands and we don't vote. We're not educated. We don't take the time to educate our neighbors. And then we sit and say, well, when is the government going to do something? What I say to you, Farrakhan, is when are the people who are feeling the oppression that you say that they're feeling going to finally rise up and have a revolution against it? See, because that's when things are going to change. The government, whatever you think the government to be, right, isn't going to do. There's a set of conditions that are being set, and we have an opportunity to put people in place who can help change those sets of conditions by policies. We don't do that. Now, when we're talking, because we were talking about the after school programs and the things that are being cut, and so now in our community, people are going, oh, woe is me, but when you look at the guy, right, because the government right now is this guy named Donald Trump that people are saying, woe is me. But when they had an opportunity in 2016 and 15 to get up off of their asses and do something so that the people who were in place might set conditions that are more favorable for us to be successful, we didn't do that. And so now we're sitting going, well, what is the government going to do something again? Every damn election, we have an opportunity to reshape the government and then demand the government do something. But we don't. And so now here we are with a set of conditions that may be set because of funding being cut in after-school programs for kids who might be able to benefit from them, that might smooth the landscape for them just a little bit. And now because voters, black voters, were lazy, we aided in setting these poor conditions for them to be successful. That's what I'm saying.
Well, and that's you're right. The only thing I'll say to that is, I don't want to get into the election thing, but they do say that he lost the popular vote by 3 million people, so it wasn't even that.
Right, but you know what?
I'm just going to say that.
Right, but right. Stop. You know what that's like? Please don't make that statement to me again, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because it's like you sitting down and playing chess with me, right? And then you asking me why I can't king your pawn. You knew the game we sat down to play. We playing chess. He played chess, and now people are asking why you're not applying the rules of checkers. The game wasn't to win the popular vote. The game was to get electoral votes. He played that game, and he made it.
But our people don't know that yet. We don't know how to...
Well, okay, so government. So now again you're going to blame the government. So, but what I'm saying is this. So when we look at the conditions, the educational conditions that our kids are, are impacted by, when we look at these things that Brother Rashon is highlighting in terms of these programs being cut, and we look at the people who are cutting them, we have to take some responsibility for them being there. We can't disconnect that.
Hello?
Yep, I'm here.
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, okay, no, I can hear you. No, I agree with you. It's just that, I guess what I'm saying is, it's such a complex problem.
It really isn't complex. It's really not. My grandmother used to say trifling laziness. Trifling and being lazy. That's not complicated. Trifling and lazy. Trifling and lazy. It's not complicated. Trifling and lazy. And so until we're no longer trifling and lazy, we're going to be dealing with these issues, and we're going to be waiting for the government to fix them for us. Thanks for the call.
Sure.
All right, so well, listen, E. So
I'm sorry.
So if we go back and we start talking about these conditions, I think we have to understand that.
Because this is a horrible condition, right? $1 billion. You said it. Wiping away $1 billion worth of after-school. We know what it's going to do. We already know. It's another bomb that's getting ready to hit our community.
Yeah, and it's going to be devastating to urban communities,
right?
Particularly where we need these kind of after-school programs. But so we had this conversation about what's happening on a federal level, but then all this is a political decision, and all politics are local. So locally, how do we get ourselves in a position where we didn't have anybody advocating to make sure that we keep these kind of programs in place? How do we put ourselves in a position where we did not have individuals who were effectively evaluating the existing after-school programs and determining whether or not these were helping us to deliver the outcome that our students need? And furthermore, by having after-school programs in place, we talk about having opportunities for low income and poor families to change their circumstances or to change their environment or to change certain conditions. The question is, what are we teaching those children in our after school programs? Do we really have effective programming, or is this just another babysitting service? Because again, if it's just another babysitting service, then we should be trying to hold individuals accountable locally, because they're not pushing the envelope to make sure that we're giving our children something valuable that will then empower them to change their current situation or their circumstances.
Right. So here's what I'm going to say. Now, I may be wrong, but I'm going to say it. See, because we are so low information, we don't understand where resources come from, right? So when you have, whether they're local municipal people, mayors, board members, they all ride the wave of resources. So I'm going to call it the wave of resources. So money comes in, everybody's happy, their programs, and everybody takes credit for it. Nobody did jack squat for it, but everybody's taking credit for it. That's politics. Right? And then they're not monitoring it because they don't care. They don't care about the level of success. They don't care about metrics. They just care that right now you're pacified. You have something, and so you're happy because you got something. The quality of what you have, you don't even care about. You just want it. You just want it until you don't have it, and then you cry that you don't have it. And because these trifling politicians understand that, that's the game I see that they play. So when you have it, they beat their chest and say, see, you got it, be happy. When you don't have it, then they scream and holler that they're going to fight to get it for you so that you keep on voting for them. But none of them are looking at metrics to see, firstly, if what you had was what you needed, if what you had was working, in the way that you needed it to work for you. None of that is taking place. And so again, here we are. None of those people advocated because they didn't give a damn. That's why.
But this is a conversation we had on the show last week, and we talked about developing some goals for the community. And I stopped to interject because I have a problem when we have elected officials run for office and they are not providing us with SMART goals. They're not specific. They're not measurable. They're not attainable, realistic, or timely for the most part. You know, we have a person who can be in office and say, yeah, I'm going to fight for more funding for schools. Let's say, okay, well, how much more funding are you going to fight for? When do you plan to get that funding for us? So we find ourselves in these positions where people continue to say, hey, I'm fighting. But if you're saying that you're going to get this done for us in 6 months, then we need to be able to come back to you in 6 months and say, hey, you didn't do what you said you were going to do. You didn't deliver on that promise or that commitment that you made. And that's the important part about having those goals that are actually measurable, like you said. But the fact of the matter is we don't.
But here's something that you said and something that Munira said. And then I'm going to harken back to something my brother from another mother, Charles Love, said yesterday when he was talking about a black agenda. Munira says our local and state leaders sat back and didn't fight for us. Munira, I'm going to say you're wrong. We sat back and didn't fight for ourselves. See, understand the difference? We sat back and did not fight for ourselves. And because these elected officials saw that we were lazy and trifling and sat back and weren't willing to fight for ourselves, they said, well, that's how they roll. So they did what we do. How do you expect somebody to fight harder for you than you willing to fight for yourself? Understand what I'm saying to you. So you're asking them, you're saying, I'm not prepared to fight. I'm not prepared to do these things. I want to send you down there and do more for me than I'm willing to do for myself. Never going to happen, guys. It is never going to. We have to set an agenda that we hand to these elected officials, right? And then understand, see, because it goes all the way back.
But this is conditioning.
You got a, but you got a mayor.
It is conditioning.
It is conditioning.
We talked about the conditions in our communities. There's a top-down approach as opposed to leadership that's being grown organically and a focus that comes from the people who are on the ground level. Members of the community should be the individuals that are driving the agenda. It shouldn't be 1, 2, or 3 people sitting on the top of some hierarchy developing an agenda that they then push down to the people. We elect these individuals to stand up and serve as our representatives, to represent us, not to represent themselves or their own special interests. And if they are elected to represent us, then by all means, we should be holding these individuals accountable to do that.
Look, Rashon, task-oriented. We had several conversations on this show where we talked about this 30 million word gap, right? The value of preschool, right? And we talked about how we do have Senator Ruiz?
Senator Ruiz, yeah.
Right, who fought, who was in a heavy fight for that. For all you guys who listen to this and who really understand the value of pre-K, what are you doing? How many of you all have called her to find out how you can be of assistance to her? See, because when our politicians wage battles that are favorable to us, and we just leave them out there on the battlefield to wear themselves out fighting for us, and we're not willing to pick up the phone and say, hey, can we carry a sign for you? Can we lick an envelope or a stamp for you? Can we do something for you? Again, no. That's what I said, Munira. We sit back. We sit back and do nothing. You see, so now when we're talking about the fact that we don't have the pre-K programs that we need, and I'm saying to you that every kid that isn't given the opportunity, and so back to what I said to you, Farrakhan, the landscape, right? So the landscape that the politicians through policy set, the landscape that provides a pre-K opportunity for kids so that they're not faced with that 30 million word gap. The landscape. the landscape. But I don't blame government. I don't blame government. I blame people. People make up government. See, we say government, right? Like government is this what do you call it? That it's an inanimate object. It's not. It's not. The people are. The government is just this thing, like a building, right? But the people in the building are the ones who get it done. So when you say government, I don't understand that. Well, say senator, say congressman.
The government is an institution.
Right, it is an institution, right. But the government doesn't do anything.
And we elect individuals to represent us within that institution.
Within that institution. So let's talk about that.
On a local, state, and federal levels.
But you see what I'm saying, though, right? When we say government, then we're not focused, right? Say your senator didn't do something. Say he didn't pass this bill, that he didn't advocate for that bill. Say that your congressman was weak in the knees and didn't do something. Say that your mayor or your council people didn't get something, your assembly people or your freeholders. Say that. Don't say government. Don't say government, because there were people, there were real people who lacked the political courage and will to do certain kinds of things. And so we need to talk about them. And then we need to remove them. So, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
But it's true.
Listen, there's another interesting article, and I think this also ties into what we're discussing today. You know, I want our listeners out there to know that all of these things we talk about, we strongly believe that education is really at the foundation of all of these things. You know, education is one thing that will help us uplift our communities. It'll help our children achieve more. It'll help our children go out and compete in an environment that we hope will be level, at least from the perspective of them having the right skill sets that will allow them to be more competitive as they go out and try to shape the world. But this article was posted in The Guardian, and it's entitled, "It's Not Just the 1%. The upper middle class is oppressing everyone else too." And you know what this article really highlights is that, you know, according to research that was conducted by an economics professor, Richard Reeves, through the Brookings Institute, he defines the upper middle class as those who earn $120,000 or more per year, and that this quote-unquote upper middle class is now widening the gap that exists between the middle class and the poor, and that they are not involved in direct classism, but are taking away opportunities from poor and low-income families. And he highlights some of those examples. One thing that he jumped on and highlighted in his article that really jumped out at me was the whole idea of legacy students. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, being a legacy student means that, you know, your parent or, you know, your grandparent or someone along your bloodline attended, you know, a university or college prior to you, or they attended a well-funded program or some kind of developmental program, something along those lines, and because you are a legacy, you're kind of grandfathered in to the program, and you would get preferential treatment when being selected when a selection process is taking place to determine who gets to enroll into these colleges, universities, or programs. And you know, I'll go back to the conversation we had a few moments ago with Brother Farrakhan. We talk about the conditions of our community. We're not having conversations in the community about establishing legacies for our families, for our children, for our loved ones. So we're still in a place where we're having conversations about someone being the first, right? The first. So if you're going into that collegiate environment and you are now in a position where you're possibly going to be the first member of your family to go into college, you're not having that legacy conversation at that time. So you're not going to be able to establish your legacy until what, maybe 20, 25 years from now, after you graduated, you've had children, and now they have an opportunity. But meanwhile, the upper middle class the 1%, the upper echelon here in the United States of America, they already have that legacy established. So they continuing to move down that path of continuing to grow their legacy, continuing to have additional opportunities. When we, individuals in the urban community who aren't already established, they're just trying to get their footing in that space.
Right.
So they're playing catch up.
Those people are, like I said, the government, or the people who work within the government, the elected officials, their policies set forth conditions, right? And then we're responsible for doing the same thing. So for the folks that you're talking about who establish these legacies, they're setting conditions, right, for their children, right? They're trying to smooth the pathway to make it easier for them, right? And we have to be about the business of doing it. But Farrakhan said something very interesting. He said that, the way that we live is about us. So legacy doesn't always have to just be in education, right? Legacy could be in entrepreneurialism.
Absolutely.
Legacy could be in a whole lot of other things that you're teaching your progeny. But we don't teach them jack squat, right? We literally don't. It's almost like you just drop them out of the womb and they got to go fend for self because we're too busy trying to get ours. And so we're not creating any sort of legacy for them to follow. And I'm talking about, learning how to work hard, learning how to be honest, learning how to not blame other people, but take responsibility, right? Be accountable for all of that. That's all legacy. Look, legacy for my grandmother who didn't get past the 6th grade was your word is everything. That was her legacy. That literally, she had nothing else. She had a word. And her word got her through the whole community. Right? And then that's what she passed on to me. It was the biggest lesson. Your word, Eric. Your word. Without your word, you have nothing.
And how many doors did that legacy open?
Tons of doors.
Let's talk about that.
Tons of doors.
Because that's very important, right?
Tons of doors. And you know what? Not just, doors for me and now doors for my children. It opened up doors for my father. My father was able to apply that same logic and it opened up doors. So all over the place, right? And so we call it goodwill, right? I have goodwill within the community. And so I could walk into the community and I can, I could leverage or negotiate that goodwill to get things done.
How does that goodwill transfer over into the settings where institutions are also making decisions that will impact our lives as we move forward? So if we're talking about opportunities to get into programs, right? Whether it's educational, whether we're talking about internships, right? Which was another thing that was discussed in this article, which really highlighted how this gap is widening even more when we start to talk about the experience that these children are getting when they take on internships. Now, the likelihood of
we ain't got jack squat to give our kids, man.
A poor student, right? A poor kid being able to take an unpaid internship, right? Do you have the resources and the support that would allow you to take an unpaid internship so that you can develop some skills and get yourself some experience? So again, right? We're having this conversation about
that's not government either,
and about the resources. So, see, we got in the thread. We got
you have somebody who asked you a question. They asked, Brenda says, what influence will the mayor have in selecting our new superintendent?
So unofficially, the mayor would not be, obviously not vote, but I think through the individuals who
he'll put the screws to him. Brenda, he gonna put the screws to him.
The individuals who serve on the school board.
I'm gonna tell you,
I believe the mayor will most certainly have influence in terms
every one of them that has a job.
Every
one of those board members who has a job for city or county government, understand me, all of them will do what we listen. You saw the meme that I put on my page, right? You saw what the mayor's brother said about him. He said the mayor's the king. Oh, so let's have the conversation for a second, because it pertains to education too. See, because all hail Ras Baraka, king of Newark. So his servants extend beyond 920 Broad Street, and they extend down north on Broad to Cedar Street. So that's his whole kingdom. That's right? But you guys allow that. So yes, all of those people. When you have people on the Board of Education who are legislative aides to council people who are going to be beholden to the mayor, yes, they're going to vote the way that he wants them to vote. That's the answer to the question. I hope that it was rhetorical.
So I think the other thing that we have to keep in mind is understanding who's conflicted as a board member, because that's very important.
What do you mean by that?
So what I mean by conflicted,
I mean, I know what conflicted means. I don't want y'all to get it.
Yeah, no.
I'm saying in the context.
In the context. So in that context, as a school board member, if you have a family member, a relative who is employed by the school district, you by law are not allowed to engage in conducting the annual evaluation of a superintendent, nor can you be involved in the hiring of the superintendent for your school district. So that's something that's very important for the community to actually know.
Did you post that, or did somebody told me that three of the people were, currently some ethics violations?
We talked about there was some post that was put on Facebook.
Oh, Donald Jackson put that.
But if you actually go to the the New Jersey the Ethics Commission website, you'll find what's known as a financial and relative disclosure form, and every school board member is obligated to fill one of these forms out annually and submit it. They're all done electronically. They're online, and school board members have to put down the names of any family members that work for the school district in which they serve. And there is something called the doctrine of necessity. So if you have, let's say, a majority of your school board members are conflicted, the school board can then submit a request to the Ethics Commission to invoke the doctrine of necessity, which would allow them to then be involved in the process. But unless Newark has more than 5 people, I don't see that happening. So I think with the likelihood of some board members having family members in the district, you probably won't have all 9 board members involved in the process. And yes, again, I do believe that the mayor will have lots of influence in terms of who the next superintendent of Newark Public Schools will be.
So speaking of that, and I just posted the article. It was in NJ Spotlight. The headline is State Board Poised to End Control of Jersey City Schools. Newark may follow.
So this is interesting right now. There's a lot of conversation about local control being restored to Jersey City, Newark. There's some progress being made in Patterson, and I think it's important for us as a community to really know what that process is. Regardless of what happens or what's said between elected officials behind closed doors, the deciding vote to determine whether or not local control is restored, that comes from the State Board of Education. So they would have to, in fact, vote and pass a resolution to restore local control or any element of local control to a school district. And then from there, a transition plan would have to be developed and approved by the board as well. So, there's still a number of steps that need to take place. I think the problem that we're experiencing now throughout the state of New Jersey is that the State Board of Education members who are appointed by the governor, there's a little bit of uncertainty about who will be there over the next few months. A huge shout out, a salute to good man Mark Bedron, and also a good friend of mine, the Vice President Joe Fisicaro. And they're both likely attending their last board meetings with the State Board of Education. Governor Chris Christie has moved to replace each of them. And now time will tell who will then be put in their place and how quickly they will move towards adopting any resolution to restore local control, not just to Newark but to Jersey City as well. I will say that during my time on the board, Jersey City was seen as the example of what other school districts under state intervention should look like and how they should be working. We had the opportunity to engage with one of their board members on the show a few weeks ago, and just from that conversation, we know we can clearly see that those individuals, they are very focused, and they seem to have the right ideas in mind as it pertains to restoring local governance and moving their school district forward. So a promise was made. There was an agreement or a deal that was made between the Mayor Raz Baraka and the governor, and the governor was quoted as stating he would make sure that local control was restored to the city of Newark at the start of the 2017-2018 school year. So the school year is almost over. If that is to happen, I think we will likely see that occur either this month or during the month of July. So we really, at this point, really have to wait and see how this really transpires and what happens over the next few months.
All right, man. So, I mean, we've covered a tremendous amount of education stuff. Is there anything that has been going on that you've heard of regarding the Board of Education as they see? Well, one, in terms of winding down for this school year, what typically happens now that the school year, we've got, 2 more weeks or something like that?
Yeah.
And so what typically happens with the board? What does the board do? They do like Congress does? They go on vacation?
So the board literally goes on vacation for the summer. There aren't any public meetings, but I think what I tried to do when I was the president of the board, use that time to really develop the strategic governance plan. We also utilized that time to have some training for our board as well during the summer months. It's a lot easier to kind of get everybody together. Things are quiet. And yes, Brenda, there is a business meeting today. So Eric, we should post that information for the community as well.
Which is it?
The Newark Board of Ed school business meeting is supposed to be taking place today as well, I believe.
I hope if somebody, and I was trying to work on an intern. I thought I had one, and so this is part of my issue, right? I've asked, and I don't know how many people go to the board meetings, but I asked if we could have a round robin of people who can go, and everybody doesn't have to go to every meeting, but there is a business meeting,
two per month business meeting. I believe it.
So there are a total of 12 meetings 24 meetings a year. No, not even.
Actually, because 20. If you take away the 2 summer months.
So there are 20 meetings a year. So what I asked is if you could get say 10 people, and each person's responsible for going to 2 meetings out of the whole year, and then we broadcast these meetings, right, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, so that as many people as we can get to see them, and then we can have discussions about them. I got one person who did it one time. You know what I mean?
That was it.
And that was it. And so you scratch your head now. At some point, I'll wind up doing it. I've been interviewing interns to do a bunch of things for me here at the radio station, including stuff like that. But now I'll do it, and then people will tune in, right?
So I love this, E. However, I think that there's also something that we need to be doing to apply some pressure with the school district too. I'm not saying don't do what we've been pushing for in terms of getting the interns, E. I really have a huge problem with the delayed information, and this is a part of what we've been talking about, right? Making sure we get real-time information to the community. So the school district actually has a contract. There's a company that has a contract. They come in, they record the board meetings. They didn't get edited, and it takes about 2 weeks before those meetings get aired. So there's a delayed reaction in terms of information getting out to the community, and we need to get this out to the community real time. I think we also need to be putting pressure on the school district to there's no reason that in this day and age with the kind of technology that's available to us, that one, we still have individuals editing tapes, right, and not giving the real information. We need it raw. We need to see it exactly how it's happening at those board meetings, and we need it in a timely manner.
Can you imagine if Spicer, right, before he gave his daily briefing, like he did it in private, and then they edited it, and then later on sometime that night they showed it to you? That's kind of what's going on, right, guys? And here's my aversion to continuing with channel 78 or whatever channel you get it on as the only means. It doesn't solve the gap that exists in our community, which makes it not a community. And what I mean by that is that, you know, you go home, right, and then you cook your dinner or you do whatever you do, and then you may turn on channel 78 to watch it. But you're watching it in a silo, right? And then your neighbor who may be next door or your neighbor across town is watching it in a silo. And you guys aren't communicating about what it is that you are watching. And undoubtedly there are things that you don't know that are going on in the board meeting you may not be terribly averse at, and then you don't have anybody to ask a question. If the meetings are streamed live, much like you guys are engaging in a conversation with us and each other, can you imagine if you had a board liaison who was appointed to the social media page so that maybe they could engage you and ask questions and answer questions that you guys might have? Or imagine you live in the East Ward and you see somebody who's in the Weequake section raise a question, and you go, I never thought about that. And now you start to tie and bind the community closer together. That can really happen. And community building. But I said this when I had Surf on one time. I said, you guys talk about engagement, community engagement, but you're really not interested in community engagement because that's the simplest and doesn't cost a dime.
It doesn't.
Does not cost a dime. All it costs is a camera and a computer, which I know they already have. They have internet down at 2 Cedar Street or wherever they host these meetings, and all you have to do is set up the tripod with the camera, hit play, and then the whole community can watch the meeting.
So, you know, there's something else that I think is important for the community to know. So there is something called the Electronic School Board. There's a website. I'm going to post this right now inside of the thread. That right there is Electronic School Boards. I just posted that in the thread.
And what does that do?
So now if you go in and you click on that link, right, what it's going to do now, it takes you to a website. It's an interface on the Newark Public Schools website. During my term as president, I actually one of my goals was to make our board meetings paperless. I thought that it was a waste of money, the amount of dollars that we spent to print out these huge board packets every week. Then you had to have someone from the motor pool department come and deliver them to our houses, right? I just thought it was really senseless, and I thought it just wasn't very efficient. So this website, Electronic School Board members in Newark are able to receive their weekly board packets electronically. When you go to the board meetings, you now see an electronic vote on the board. So, you know, hence the reason that board members are now utilizing laptops at the board meeting. So when there's a vote, you actually have to go onto your laptop, record your vote, and it actually shows on the screen at the board meetings. The other piece that I don't believe was ever rolled out by the district, there's a public site and there's a private site here. The public site is supposed to house the minutes from every board meeting, and there's also the goal was to utilize the public site to also make the public meeting agenda and the public board packet available for the community members to review at the same time that it was made available to the board members, so that we can have a more educated conversation and dialogue when our community members came to the board meeting. So if you're on the North Public Schools website, if you click under Board of Education, and on the left hand side there's a tab. You go down, right underneath Board of Education, there's a link that says Electronic School Board website. All right. And if you click on that, it takes you to the website. Again, there is you can toggle back and forth between the public site and the private site, but I'm just not sure that the school district is actually
are they using it?
Really utilized it.
There
right.
you go.
So as I'm in here now, you can see there's a number of board meetings that are listed here, but there aren't any actual minutes from the meetings for you to review. So again, if you go up to the top of the screen, go Board of Education, and click on it, and then once you get to the next page right here, Electronic School Board website.
Got it.
And you know, this right here again was really put in place because for two reasons. One, the amount of money that we will be able to save by going paperless as a board, and then two, utilizing this as a way to really inform the community. If you go to a board meeting, you get this thick packet that kind of shows you all of the things that are being voted on, but it doesn't give you any of the details or supporting information that board members might have to determine why they're voting on a particular item. And I think it's important for the community to also have that information so that they can hold the board members accountable. So now, right, we're talking about it here. We know that the platform is set up, but we need to make sure that we're pushing back or putting some pressure on the board members to ensure that this system is actually being utilized to, based on its full capabilities, and also allowing us to empower the community. So,
well, look, I would hope that our community would get these documents, these supporting documents that you're talking about, that the board members have to look at or should be looking at, because I've been told that there are board members who didn't come to board meetings prepared, and the first time they opened their packet was when they were sitting there on the dais. So I would hope that the community would be focused enough and care enough to go through this data and then be ready to understand the discussions and arguments that are taking place at the board meetings and why board members are voting certain things. I don't think that's going to happen. And so what I would rather see, simply because I know the electorate, is that we in the studio get this data, and we find some volunteers who are willing to help us comb through the data, right? And then when they have the board meeting, if we can stream it live, and I'm working on doing that we actually have people in that thread who are explaining step by step, this is why Leah did this, this is why Marquise voted that way. On page such and such in the document, you can see whatever. And then maybe, the documents come in PDF format.
Yeah, so I'm actually I clicked on one of the links for the meeting for June 20th, which will be at Oliver Street School at 6 p.m. And one of the things that's important, so there's going to be a proclamation and recognition and appreciation of the Week Wake High School band. So, and I love to see when students are being
why one band and not the other band?
I don't know. I would have to see if there's some details in here about the resolution.
Oh, okay.
So I don't actually have the details of the resolution, but what I do want to highlight is this other item that's very important. So item 10.1 on the agenda, there's a resolution for the board to adopt the recommendation from the class size and composition audit final report. So for those of us who are not, for those of you who are unfamiliar with this report, if you go on the district's website, again, click on Board of Education on the NPS website. On the left-hand side of the page, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll see board reports. And under board reports, you will see two reports listed. One is the Newark Board of Education District Assessment, which was done in 2015 under my leadership as board president. And the second report you will find is the Class Size and Composition Preliminary Board Audit Report from 2017. This report, I'm just going to go ahead and download it. I did have an opportunity to kind of skim through this a couple of weeks ago, Eric. And this report was something that was led by Leah Owens. Kim Gaddy was involved in this report as well. And I'm just waiting for this PDF to download. All right, got it. So this is a preliminary report. It was done in February 2017. It was led by the Program Instruction Committee, who the chair at the time, Leah Owens, Vice Chair Dashe Carter, and then board members Crystal Fonseca and Kim Gaddy. So I like this. I like how all the women are on this this committee. This is the committee that I think needs the most work, because this really has the greatest impact on student achievement.
Well, according to the chairman, it's time for men to lead.
Time for men to lead. Well, maybe some men should step up and volunteer to serve and help out on that committee. But without a doubt, I think that the person leading that committee should be someone who has educational experience and someone who really knows what it's like to be in a classroom and can really break down what's happening in the educational environment and make some sound recommendations. But as we go through the report, so this came because of an outcry from the Central High School PTSA about oversized classrooms in the school. So the Program and Instruction Committee requested from Newark Public Schools a complete list of Central High School's class size counts, in addition to the enrollment numbers for all of the district schools. And they reviewed that information, and what it revealed basically was that many schools were over-enrolled compared to the budgeted amount of students that was set in spring of 2016. And just want to go through this really quickly and highlight some of the findings. So one of the findings was that 1 out of every 3 classrooms in the pre-K 3 through 8th grade span is over the legal threshold. Schools that are located within the 07105 zip code, commonly known as the Ironbound section of Newark, have the highest level of oversized classrooms at 74.8%. So in other words, 3 out of every 4 classrooms in the Ironbound are overpopulated. It also states that the number of extra students in the pre-K 3 through 8th grade classrooms ranges from 1 to 13. So you can have up to 13 additional students in the classrooms, and then just over half of these classes are under the legal limit. Oversized classrooms have a fairly equal distribution across the grade span. And again, like I certainly applaud them for developing this report. And it also highlights that in the 9th through 12th grade, so in a high school setting, the additional students in the classrooms range from 1 to 12. So you can have, in some instances, 1 additional student over the threshold, and some you have up to 12. And in 2 instances, they recorded class sizes of 52 and 69.
Now, how do people get a hold of this report?
You can go to the Newark Public Schools website, and if you click on the tab, on the top tab, if you click on Board of Education, that will take you to the Board of Education's page, and you scroll all the way down to the bottom, and you'll see a link on the left-hand side that says Board Reports. Click on that, and it opens up the report for you. And what I'll do, let me just take this link right here. That'll get you straight to the Board Reports, and put this inside of our Facebook thread.
And then I'm going to ask you while you're doing that, 40 seconds, if you could answer this question. Corey says, how can we work to bring back those programs we once had in the school that helped our kids, like the Gifted and Talented, SKEEP?
I remember SKEEP. Honestly, once those programs are gone, it is very, very, very difficult to now bring those programs back. And the reason it's difficult, and we had Deborah Terrell talk about this during the election, right? She said it's one thing to reduce the funding for the programs, but once you eliminate them, it's very hard to bring them back, because those funds that were earmarked for those programs are now being redirected towards something else within the school district. So to bring those programs back, one or two things needs to happen. You need to have additional funding now, right, to allow you to bring in this additional programming, or you have to shut down some other programs in the district and use that funding to now cover that. So I think if we have enough outcry from the community at these board meetings about having these kind of programs, I think it will help us move forward with getting some of these programs put back in place in the district.
All right, so this is Eric.
And this is Rashon.
And we're out.
Peace.
This has been the Eric Dawson Radio Show.
It's not just about America. It's about understanding
94.3 Reggae, dance hall, soca, hip hop and R&B, African, disco, oldies but goodies.
Hi, this is Janet Jackson.
We're bridging the gap. Seriously. Splash Radio 94.3 New Jersey.
For the most authentic Caribbean food in town, check out Sunsplash Caribbean Bakery and Restaurant. They got the natural organic juice bar that'll get your day started right. Like the Power Punch, the Fig Juice, the Mega Green, roots like the Immortal and the Resurrection. And peep this, they have an extended bakery department that whips up my favorite, the hot Hardo bread. White or wheat, that's your choice.
If you're feeling hungry, just grab a bite. Sunsplash Liquid Food Tracks. Jamaican party, $1 veggie. Sunsplash Liquid Food Tracks. Mix the deal, but they call me El Paris.
Serving breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They also cater to vegans and vegetarians with the Ital stew and the Ital aki, the soul jerk salmon and mango tilapia. And of course, they got the usual curry goat,